Say anything.
Why can't you just say anything?
I'm gonna say anything.
People just say anything.
I swear, people just say anything. Welcome to Say Anything with Keena B.
Hey, welcome to Say Anything with Keena B. I am Keena B, and today, as promised, we have Charles Bwembya, Mr. Charles Bwembya, who is my husband. As I said in the first episode of this season, Charles will be joining us on and off the season in order to have some conversations that have a different perspective. And we are lucky enough to have him today. And just a little bit about Charles, other than the fact that he's my wonderful husband. He has a master's degree in business, and he is currently working on his Ph.D. He is studying how Central African immigrants use their skills in order to start a business within the United States. His skill set is vast and varied. As I previously have mentioned in other episodes, he once hosted a radio show called In the Morning with Charles Bwembya on the AM radio station. And for a year, he interviewed locals in our North Florida area and had some international guests about varying topics. So he is no stranger to being a host. He is a proud president of Zambian organizations here in Florida and a member of committees that involve Zambian immigrants within the United States that tackle several different important subject matters that help and aid Zambians that have immigrated into the U.S. So he is passionate about his home country and how they relate within the United States and on an ongoing basis, and keeping his connection with that community strong. It's one of the things I love about him, and the fact that he is able to be culturally connected and maintain himself within his community is something that is very admirable. Now, today we will talk about developing countries. Please welcome my husband, Charles Bwembya. Hey, Charles.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Charles, tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Charles. Keena is my wife. I'm originally from Zambia. I've been in the United States for a little over 16 years. Well, she did talk about me a little bit, so maybe I'll end it there.
Okay. Well, you have a large family. No?
Yes, I do have a large family.
Tell the people about that. How many brothers and sisters?
We are 10 total, so it's a large family.
It's very, that's similar to my mother's family. My mother had 11, so they had that in common, having a large family. That's also where we differ, because it was just me and my brother growing up. So it was me, my mom, my dad, my brother, and I. Family of 4. So he was used to having a very large family, and I was kind of used to the opposite, small. You think that plays a part in who you are today?
I'm not sure, because I don't know how it is in small families, but in big families, we're not only a big family. We had a lot of extended family living with us, so it's a little bit different from the American scenario. So even if you're in Zambia, even if you have a small family, most likely you have other extended family members either visiting or living with you. So you learn accommodating other people, sharing, and all that, and just thinking about others as you do things. Because during school holidays, there will be a lot of people at my house. I think at one point I counted 25 people in one house. Fortunately, we usually had very big houses, so that can accommodate those many people. So you have to be constantly thinking about others as you do things. So,
and the reason I bring that up is because culturally, the dynamics, that is not a culture issue that you find here in the U.S. a lot. Like, it has become more nuclear here in the U.S. Not that there aren't families that are like that. And I do have a large extended family, but they are not like in the house with you. You have to go and find them or go visit them. You have to make a point to go see them. Whereas in Zambia, they just might pop up or they're already there. And part of that, I'm trying to make a connection here to our topic, which is developing countries. And when we decided to talk about this particular topic, we were trying to figure out what is a developing country. Well, I was trying to figure out. My husband already knew. What is the true definition of a developing country? So can you share with the people what is a definition of a developing country? What makes a country developing? Because when we were talking, you mentioned that China is still considered a developing country. And I was kind of shocked by that, because China, of all places, seems to be, when it comes to infrastructure, seems to be on par or sometimes surpassing many countries. Also GDP, things like that. Now, politically, whatever their beliefs are, it differs from the U.S. and other places. But I did not think that had anything to do with status of being developing. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting dimension, because being developed, among the things they look at, technological advancement, infrastructure, GDP, income levels, and I've seen some papers that have also included like free markets in being developed. So these are the major factors, like GDP. China is the strongest, it's the second strongest economy in the world. It has the second largest GDP. It has massive in great infrastructure. They have technological advancement. So they have all these, and they're still called a developing country. Part of it, some have said it's because maybe they also the per capita income is also part of it, which sometimes can be subjective, because if you say, well, lower income people, what they make in China, you compare to what they make here, it may not be a very accurate or right comparison, because the cost of living in China is different from here. So,
meaning lower or higher?
The cost of living is higher in the United States. It's lower in China. So what you need to live comfortably in China is lower than what you need to live comfortably here. And so are many places like that. So when you use those factors directly, like you are making less here, so you are supposed to be poor, it's a little bit subjective, and it can easily turn into comparing apples to oranges.
It does sound like comparing apples to oranges, because even throughout the United States, what the cost of living is, like say here in North Florida, is completely different than what the cost of living is in South Florida. And also the salaries are typically match that. But the state of Florida will pay someone here in North Florida is for the same position is different than what they will pay for someone in South Florida for the same position because the cost of living is different. And so it would make sense that people would be paid differently based on the fact that their cost of living is lower. However, actually, in my perfect way of thinking, that you get paid based on the type of work you're doing, not necessarily based on the cost of living. So if the value of the work that you're doing is worth 6 figures, then no matter where you're living, you should be being paid 6 figures. So even if you chose to live in a space where the cost of living was lower, but I guess that's a different subject matter altogether. Because I guess that's coming to fairness. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is who sets the standard for who is developing, and is that standard set? Is there a consensus in every country, or is that also up for dispute?
Yeah, to begin with, countries can determine what they include in their GDP. Okay? So they can come up with anything. They say, wow, if children do chores in the house, that is an economic activity. You can quantify that in terms of money, and if you want, you can add it to the GDP. It's just, I haven't seen a very specific particular standard of what to include. Some countries never used to include some parts of real estate. Now they do. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but also GDP alone, on the other hand, may not be the only thing to determine how developed a place is. But in the case of China, they not only have like the GDP, they also have infrastructure and technology. Do they have some income inequalities? Yes, they do. But the U.S. has that too.
When you mentioned that GDP is not the only factor, it probably is. It definitely shouldn't be, because in all fairness, like the state of California has a very high GDP, right? But they also have a very high homeless population. Yeah. And for whatever reason, their infrastructure does not support. There's a lot of housing, but not a lot of people in the homes. And people are not even able to afford the home. So the cost of living there is crazy high. I would not consider that to be a positive point to say, hey, you're developing. You are considered a developed country or a developed state even. Because to me, it's just too counterproductive.
Yeah, that's a very good point you brought in, because California just surpassed some more countries as the largest economy in the world, because they're looking at the GDP. California as a state, it used to be the 5th largest economy in the world. Now it has moved to like 4th place, or 3rd place or 4th place, probably. I want to say 4th. So if California is the 4th largest economy in the world, if you take California and you take a country like Sweden or Norway, which are not in the top 4, if you look at, so California have a higher GDP, but if you look at the standard of living, you look at the ratio of the people that have housing and the homeless, it's going to be very different. Mm-hmm. People... In a positive way or in a negative way? It's in a positive way. They're going to there is way less homelessness in Norway than in California, and overall the standard of living and the quality of living is better overall. But when you compare the GDP between the two, Norway will have a much lower GDP compared to California. But overall, I would say the vast population live better.
Now, okay, so that brings me to, because I want to pull the continent in on this conversation, and specifically, let's talk Central Africa, since that's what your PhD thesis is on. I want to pull them in this way because Norway, just as an example, might have a better living situation culturally because they have less homelessness. But I would also say that in countries like in Central Africa, countries like Zambia, I don't see homelessness. People are not homeless. Now, they may not have a high GDP, but they are not walking around homeless there.
No, there's so much. No, usually, like if you go in Lusaka Business District or Kitwe, there's some children considered homeless, but those children usually left their home somewhere, and they decide to do whatever they do in the Central Business District. They can still go back to where they came from. So the levels of homelessness in Zambia are very, 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 very low. And usually, it's very rare to find somebody who is not mentally unwell and homeless in Zambia.
So the choices, it's not because of finances, it's because of choices, mainly.
Mainly, because even what are considered poor people normally in Zambia will have a shelter somewhere. Now, it may not be, it's not going to be the best of the shelters, but they're going to have shelter. It's very, very rare to find regular functioning people homeless.
When you say the best of shelters, do you mean like what people would consider shanty towns? Or
yeah, some of them live in shanty towns, so they'll have some structure there, built with clay and bricks and whatever, and they may not have electricity, but they do have shelter. Mm-hmm. So
okay, and that's based on economics, or is that based on what would attribute to that type of situation?
It is economic, so they don't have access to money as other people would. Mm-hmm. So they have very, very limited low income. So they live in those kind of, But the issue with some developing countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe, or even Malawi, and many African countries, it's so sometimes every time when somebody says poor countries, I want to explain something, but are those countries poor? You say, yeah, they are, and they're poor people. But what Zambia has, let's say, in the ground, for example, in terms of gold, emeralds, copper, the country, if you consider what we have, the country shouldn't be poor. Mm-hmm. And if we were that poor, we wouldn't be attracting all those major, corporations coming there, want to do mining and want to do business there. So it's a matter of how we use and harness those resources. But and most people would say the easiest way to talk about it is, well, it's your leadership. You have wrong leaders and all that. That's one way to look at it. But there's so many dimensions to it. There are also historical dimensions and context that you need to put in mind. I don't want to start blaming colonialism that ended 60 years ago.
But it still plays a
but
part.
But also
60 years is not that long.
It's not that long because some oppressive tendencies are like energy. They don't end, they just change the form. So they will just evolve into something else. You say, well, we want to be independent for the case of, let's say, West Africa. And then the colonizer says, well, we spent a lot of money on your infrastructure. So you're going to be giving us X amount of dollars every year to pay us back for the infrastructure. First of all, Nobody invited you there to put infrastructure. You put infrastructure to benefit you. Are you going to give back what you took before we gained independence? Before we talk about us paying you for the infrastructure? You should just leave. Nobody invited you here. So that's one way to keep them poor and keep them going back. And then, when they were giving these countries back to Africans, they have done the groundwork. They have changed the way we think. They had changed the way we respect our own traditions because, first, the things that we are good at, were kind of tainted. So you start learning new things, so that takes you thousands of years backwards. Because if you're developing your own way with things that you've practiced over thousands or millions of years, you'll be good at that. But when you start learning new things and new systems, you'll always be behind because you're competing with people that have been practicing those systems a long time. So what I'm trying to say is that even when they were leaving, they figured that, they left structures and systems that were very new to us and knew we struggled to manage those.
Because you also have the component of those who are still trying to practice the traditional ways that they were doing things versus those who are trying to adapt to and adopt the colonial way of doing things. And I guess there would be a struggle, a push and pull, because there might be those who just want to hang on to the older ways, which would be perfectly fine. Yes. And those who want to adopt more Western ways, which, good or bad, creates an issue because it might run up against the wall of cultural things that are happening.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is the British, for example, for a long time, like other colonizers elsewhere in Central Africa, Rwanda, Burundi, first, they make you think you're inferior and they make you think they can do things better. Because in Kitwe, I don't know if you noticed when we were there, if I showed you, there are two central business districts. One is called first class, one is called second class.
So they introduced a class system.
Yes, so the first class where all Caucasians were first class. Everybody else was second class and they shopped in different places. So
and then they introduced a color system, a class and color system.
Yeah.
Okay.
They did. So, of course, the first class area looked more prosperous and better. So you start thinking they do things better than we do. So even when you're trying to deal with mining, you're thinking they're going to do mining better than us. And when they come in there, they detect the terms. Look, we're bringing employment here. We're going to do this for 5 years without paying taxes because we have to grow our businesses. You know for sure that no American company is going to be doing business that long and they're just putting money there and they're not earning much. I know the investment, but companies can invest and over a long time they start making money. But it's not the case with when you're extracting minerals from the ground. Because if you're mining gold and cobalt, those commodities cost a lot of money. Mm-hmm. You're going to make money very quickly. And if you compare how much they buy the mines, how much they put in, and how much they take out, it just doesn't align. But what remains in the country is very little. But we keep thinking that these people are the solutions to our prosperity.
So it makes me think of a couple of different things, which probably makes for a longer conversation than we have today. So we'll have to continue it at another time. But one thing that you brought up, because there's so many levels in what you were just talking about that my brain has hit on a couple of different points. One was fair negotiations of the use of resources within the country and who is responsible for that, and who do you blame when the country is not benefiting from fair negotiations, if they're having fair negotiations. Two, who sets the standard for what is considered living better. So you were talking about first class, second class, and that the first class was considered Caucasians part of town, and that the infrastructure there, everything looked better to their eye. But is it through their eyes that you're looking at what looks better, and what is considered better versus a different standard, or is it actually better? Like, was it something that people in the country actually aspired to be like? And so that to me is more of a cultural question of living standards, right? Yes. And what works and what doesn't, but what's appropriate and what is, and so on. So those are the two things that stayed in my brain when you were talking, which we can talk about another day.
Okay. Yeah.
Baby wanga ninga kuneti zivane, sweetie wanga ninga kuneti kondane. Baby wanga ninga kuneti zivane, sweetie wanga ninga kuneti.
Thank you for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed this first part of conversation. There's going to be several conversations continuing, but this particular conversation did continue. And we will bring you part 2 next Monday. Join us again and listen to part 2 next Monday and every Monday of season 3 of Say Anything with Kina B.